priceless. He knows like how insane it was. In Big Al, they hear it. Big Al fold an ace as well.
So Chidwick, he defends the big blind. He is started today second place. Currently, I believe in last place. So a very small continuation from it from Rajkumar, pretty much trying to just take it down. Denying its opponent equity. Now if you're Chidwick, you got top pair. So queen on the turn, straight. Looks like he's gonna reach for more chips. I like this actually. If you think about it, the queen actually doesn't hit Chidwick that much. It's a pretty cool bet actually from Vivek. Very good hand reading, but it seems like Chidwick's going nowhere. Still gonna make the call.
Just dialed in. He's ready. He's in there.
But you're still gonna get called by hands like 10-9.
So it seems that Randy Lou really likes this card for Vivek to continue betting. And I'm not entirely sure why. We discussed this a bit on our podcast. Randy really thinks that the queen doesn't hit Chidwick that much. And sure, when you take into account his entire range, that can be true of almost any card. But the queen feels like it is at least somewhat coordinated with the board and coordinated with the types of hands that Chidwick would have had on the flop that now improved on the turn, such as queen 8, queen 10, king queen, queen jack, queen 9, queen 4 suited. Those all feel like strongly in Chidwick's range. So I don't know why Randy is so into this bet by Vivek. What do you think?
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, I don't feel strongly about this as you do. There are lots of hands that Chidwick has where that queen seems like a bad card for him, right? Like that he called with on the flop, i.e. a lot of 9s and a lot of 4s mainly. Certainly the 9s that are like 9-10 are probably sticking around for, the straight draws.
8-9 as well, you'd expect.
Probably 8-9 as well. But like all the other 9s and all the 4s and the ace highs and all that, mostly don't love that card at all.
Ace high is not a huge part of his flop range even. Pre-flop he was jamming a lot of ace highs.
Oh, that's probably true with 22 blinds. That's fair. That's fair. But still, having said all that, like I understand that point from Randy.
I forgot about 2 though. 8-10 and king 10. Chidwick definitely has in his range as well, which now are straights.
He definitely has king 10 in his range,
yeah,
for sure. Now, sometimes he's going to check raise those hands, but a lot of time he isn't, especially when the flop bet was so tiny. It was only 300K. So, yeah, I'm not sure if this card, it feels almost range neutral to me. It probably helps Vivek a little bit more. He probably has more queens in his range ultimately, right? But I agree that it doesn't feel like it never hits Chidwick.
Vivek
certainly
probably has more queens in his range, but my point is that it seems like a negative event for the bluffer versus a positive event, which is what Randy is saying. And I don't think you would even entertain the idea that it's a positive event or that it's a neutral event if Randy didn't say anything.
I certainly wouldn't think it was a positive event without him saying it. That made me, I was like, interesting. I wonder why. And I started to think about it. I will say this. I like the idea of Vivek betting here, regardless, because it's not only is the queen, it's the queen of spades. We have the ace of spades as Vivek. That's good. That sets up some potential triple barrels for us anyway. Also, we have a massive chip lead, and this is a huge tournament. This is over a £1 million buy-in. We are in the money here. First place is 19 million pounds, Grant, and everyone's locked up like 1.6 million. There's so much money to be won. I like the idea of just putting more pressure on Chidwick.
Right,
here.
I agree with that as a holistic strategy, but you're just kind of talking about betting with impunity as a chip leader, and regardless of what the card is.
That is mostly what I'm talking about. It's like, this hurts you a lot more than it hurts me, right, buddy? Feel the pain.
Yeah.
Kind of
Now,
yeah, I agree.
To be fair, I'm only kind of saying this in such a reactionary way because of Randy's effusiveness about how the queen did not necessarily help Chidwick. As we see, it didn't. But Chidwick still has a hand that he has to call with, right? And I actually, to be clear, I think it's fine for Vivek to continue betting for all the reasons that you said.
Yeah.
But this is a no-brainer for Chidwick, right? You just got to call.
I mean, you don't love it at all, but you still absolutely have to call. There are other hands you're folding here, right? You're folding your 4s. I assume you're folding a bunch of your 9s, not all of them.
You'd think.
Maybe most of them, but not all of them. I would think it's a little unclear. But so like your jacks, you just can't go folding them against a guy like Vivek in this situation, especially.
Absolutely not.
All aboard the nitrogen train.
Choo choo.
That's right. We are back. It's Candyland time, people, because Nitrogen Sports wants you to know that at the end of every month, we've got a special Poker Guys tournament with a massive overlay every single month. You just have to use the pinned tweet that we have on our Twitter feed to sign up for Nitrogen. That's to get access to this amazing tournament.
Choo choo.
Also, sports betting, also casino games. It's all in Bitcoin. We'll see you there.
A lot of 10s in there, so I don't think Vivek was completely surprised he got called. And I think if he does bet this flop and this turn card, he should consider bluffing the river.
How much you got left?
So how much you got left?
5?
That's the. I'm thinking about putting you all in play. I would love to see him shove it all in.
All in.
All
Does
in.
go for it.
Amazing.
It's gonna put this test to Stevie. And again, Stevie is not a player that is afraid. He is very capable. He knows what's going on. He knows what's the possibilities here. He realizes Vivek is chip leader. He's capable. But man, this could be a while. Chidwick is in the matrix right now, working it out, thinking about it. Maybe, you talk about poker, live poker, one of the game's greatest players. He does call.
My
I mean,
God.
welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the big stage. Stephen Chidwick, just absolutely savage play there. I mean, this guy is a true wizard. You saw Bill go.
You know what they say about the inevitable?
What?
Ultimately it's going to happen. And it feels like
That's
was
the definition of inevitable.
Yeah, I know, and that seems like that was the case with this shove on the river by Vivek, right? Like this has been
Yes.
set up the whole time. Vivek is shoving this river almost entirely because of the situation, right? The money situation that we're in, the chip situation that these two players have. It feels like so clear that Vivek is going to shove the river.
Yeah.
Let's forget about those situations for a second
Okay.
before talking about Chidwick's call.
Sure.
Is this a good idea by Vivek to shove the river without the situations, but just on this run out against this player in this situation?
I think it is. I like shoving the river for sure here. Vivek has all the strong hands.
Yep.
Like everything. He's got the nuts with King 10. He's got 8-10 for the straight. He's got all the two pairs, or nearly all the two pairs.
He's got a lot of them.
Yeah, not all of them. Fine. But he has nearly all the two pairs. He has pretty much all the sets. Maybe not a set of sixes, but everything else.
Yep.
It feels like a great time to
Pocket
shove.
kings, pocket aces, he's shoving, I assume.
I think he is.
Ace queen, he's probably even shoving.
I think ace queen is probably a shove. These are a little closer, but Chidwick doesn't have that many chips anyway. It's okay if somehow once in a while Chidwick is slow playing something really strong. I think we can shove top.
I think
top
you're
here.
just losing money over time by not shoving ace queen against a guy like Chidwick.
Especially when Chidwick has less than a pot size bet left, and he's checked again. It feels like we're just supposed to shove.
All right,
that.
so certainly that's convincing that Vivek has enough good hands that his story makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Right. He can easily have a strong hand that would feel comfortable shoving and be trying to get value.
Yeah.
And also the money situation is a factor and should play to Vivek's advantage. So he also blocks, by the way, Queen 8 and 8-10, which is pretty nice.
That's
because those are two hands that Chidwick is definitely not folding. I would imagine Chidwick is not folding Queen 8. Maybe
that's the question.
Yeah.
8-10 obviously is not folding.
Well, let's assume as Vivek that Chidwick's calling with his queens.
Okay.
I think it's probably a safe assumption that we see he calls with Jack 5.
Fair enough.
He calls with Jack 5. Let's talk about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Does that seem good? Because on first inspection, I'm like, I don't know about this,
Sonny.
Stephen Chidwick. What's going on with this call here?
My first inclination is to say that I would rather be calling with 9-10 than with Jack 5 because 9-10 blocks the nuts and the second nuts. It blocks the straights, and 9-10 and Jack 5 are doing the same against the value range that's shoving here, right?
Yeah.
There's no bluffs that we're losing to with 9-10 that we're beating with Jack 5, I don't believe. It's all the same. So I'd rather block some of his strong hands. Jack 5, in theory, then, is the worst hand we might be able to show up with here that we called with on the turn, unless, and this is the key, unless Chidwick is calling with more nines than we were assuming on the turn.
Right. We were kind of going into this with the assumption that if you were going to call the turn with a 9, it would have something else to do with the board too. So like 8-9 minimum. So he's got 8-9 and 9-10, which are both better calls than Jack 5 because of the blocker scenario, because they both block 8-10 and King 10, King 10 respectively, which is very important in this scenario. You have to have blockers if you're going to make these marginal calls. So yeah, Jack X with no blockers might be the worst hand that Chidwick can show up with, which would mean that you're supposed to fold, right?
Yeah.
Because you have other hands that you can call with that are better, like Queen 8, like Queen 10, like King Queen.
So
Some
many
slow
others.
played hands.
Yeah.
So that feels bad. It feels like you shouldn't do that. So maybe the case then, because Stephen Chidwick is very put together from a GTO standpoint, is that he actually is calling with all of his nines on the turn. And that changes the equation distribution-wise. Do you think that's what's going on?
I mean, that's my best guess, unless he picks up something on Vivek. I don't know, but I don't believe that. I think Vivek is not the guy who's giving it away. I think none of these guys are really giving it away.
No, and I don't think these guys are relying on physical tells against each other.
Very rarely are they, I think, especially against each other. Yeah. So it almost seems like the answer has to be that he's got more 9s than we were giving him credit for on the turn.
Or
So
maybe even some 4s. I don't know.
Maybe some 4s too. So he's just chopping that stuff off the bottom of what he, of his range that gets here, and then he can still call with Jack 5. It feels really, really thin though, man.
Maybe
Like,
on top
super
of that,
thin.
he's expecting the Vivek to triple barrel bluff a ton just
Yeah.
because of the scenario that
he
we're
has
in.
to. That has to be part of it. Too.
Yeah. Maybe those two things. I mean, it just has to mean that he's calling with a lot more hands in the turn, or else I don't know how you could call the river with the literal worst hand in your range.
This is like such a big spot. There's so much money on the line here for Chidwick to make this call. Even with everything we just said, let's say you're like, well, this is like higher up in my range than I might think in my terms of my distribution. So I should probably call here theoretically. And I think he's going to triple barrel a lot. I think almost everyone in the world still folds, even with all those thoughts, because there's millions and upon millions. This is the biggest tournament. First place is literally the biggest first place prize of all time.
Yeah.
It's $23 million or something like that.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah. What do you think about these plays, especially on the river? What do you think, people? Should Vivek go for it? Should he be pulling that trigger? We liked it, but do you just think it's wrong? Do you think he's just not getting it through enough? I mean, Chidwick called with Jack 5. He might be calling with a lot then. It seems like he must be. Do you like Chidwick's call? Is there something you picked up on that maybe we didn't? Let us know in the comments. We want to hear what you have to say.
And if you want to hear more about this hand, more in-depth analysis, you got to check out our podcast. It's the Breakdown Poker Podcast. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. We do 2 a week instead of 1 like the video. We'll see you there.